I was 16 when this happened, and being from Saskatchewan, Canada, I was beyond excited to escape our brutal winters and visit my dad and stepmom in Texas during the holidays. For those who don't know, Saskatchewan winters are something else entirely. We're talking temperatures that make your nose hairs freeze. So Texas, even in winter, felt like spring to me. I should probably mention that I'm what people would call stereotypically Canadian polite. I'll be nice to you until you cross a line. Then all bets are off. I'm also pretty short, was only about 4 feet 7 inches at the time, but anyone could tell I wasn't a little kid. I was at Target the week after Christmas, wearing shorts and a tank top my mom had bought me. Now my mom's a traditional teacher and always made sure I dressed appropriately, so we're not talking about anything scandalous here. My stepmom was getting groceries while I browsed the clothing section, just minding my own business with my headphones in. Suddenly, someone yanked my headphones out of my ears. I turned around to see this woman glaring at me like I just committed a crime. She immediately started demanding to know where my parents were. When I asked what was wrong, she just repeated her question more aggressively, even calling me stupid. I tried to tell her to leave me alone, but she wouldn't back down, insisting on knowing where my parents were. When I asked why she wanted to know, she started ranting about how I was too young to be by myself and threatened to call the police because of how I was dressed. I tried explaining that I was old enough to shop for clothes alone and that I wasn't dressed inappropriately, but she wouldn't listen. She just got more worked up, claiming that only bad girls dressed like me in this weather and questioning whether my parents had taught me to respect my body. I attempted to explain that I wasn't from there and was just visiting for the holidays, but she refused to believe me. She insisted that I was lying and needed to learn to dress appropriately for the weather. That's when this huge guy, must have been over 6 feet tall, came stomping over, dragging a little boy who looked about 6 years old with him. He asked what was going on, and his wife, the woman harassing me, told him she was trying to make me put on proper clothes. I repeated that I wasn't from there and lived in Saskatchewan, but the husband actually claimed Saskatchewan didn't exist. He started ranting about how people who dressed like me were the reason they homeschooled their child, saying they didn't want him to be corrupted. When I tried to explain that Saskatchewan was in Canada, the woman told me to shut up and called me a witch. I snapped back, suggesting that maybe if they sent their kid to school, he'd actually learn where Canada was. That's when she really lost it and started screaming even louder, saying awful things about me and my mom. Now I need to explain something. My mom raised me as a single parent. My dad was barely in the picture until recently, and I was only here trying to reconnect with him. You can say whatever you want about me, but nobody, and I mean nobody, talks trash about my mom. I started walking toward the front of the store to find employees, but they followed me, still dragging their poor kid along. I turned around and shouted back at them, making it clear that I wasn't from Texas, pointing out my lack of a southern accent and emphasizing that I wasn't a child or dressed inappropriately. That's when the husband got right in my face, threatening to have me arrested. He was so close I could feel his spit hitting my face. Then he grabbed me and threatened to make me a prison witch. Big mistake. What he didn't know was that I've been taking self-defense classes for years. I kneed him hard, and as he went down I kicked him right in the face. Not gonna lie, I was pretty proud of that shot. Security and police showed up pretty quickly after that. I showed them my ID proving I was both from Saskatchewan and a minor, which made things even worse for the husband. They called my stepmom to the front, and when she heard what happened, she was furious. The officer asked if I wanted to press charges, and I did, though I was worried about how that would work since I lived in Canada. I also told them I was concerned about their kid. If they acted like this in public, what were they like at home? They called EMTs to check both of us out. Turns out I might have broken the husband's nose, but I was fine aside from some bruising. The kid's grandmother came to pick him up, and she was super nice, apologizing for her son and daughter-in-law's behavior. Last thing I saw was both of them sitting in separate police cars. Found out later that Karen was found guilty of harassment, and her husband was convicted of harassment and assault on a minor. I never found out what happened to their kid, but I really hope he ended up with someone who could teach him better than his parents did. You know how some people say retail work builds character? Well, I'd say it builds patience more than anything else. I learned this firsthand during my university years when I was working as a team leader at one of those big supermarket chains. You know the ones, with the two bright fluorescent lights and endless aisles of everything you could possibly need. I hadn't exactly planned to work in retail while pursuing my degree in business administration, but life had other plans. My partner and I had found out we were expecting a baby during my second year of university. It wasn't planned, but we were excited about it. The thing is, babies are expensive and student loans only stretch so far. So there I was, 8 months pregnant, waddling around a supermarket in a polyester uniform that barely contained my growing belly, trying to juggle coursework, impending motherhood, and the joys of retail management. The evening shift was my domain. From 4 p.m. to midnight, I was essentially in charge of the front end. All the checkouts, all the cashiers, all the problems. The regular managers had long gone home, leaving me with a headset and the responsibility of handling whatever chaos came our way. The headset would buzz whenever a cashier needed help, just telling me which checkout needed attention, but not what kind of help they needed. It was like retail roulette. You never knew if you were walking into a price check or World War III. This evening started like any other. I was in the middle of the store putting away some abandoned items. You know, the stuff people decide they don't want and just leave wherever they please. My headset buzzed. Checkout 4 needed assistance. Simple enough. I started making my way there when checkout 8 buzzed in too. No problem, I thought. I'll handle them one at a time. The walk to checkout 4 took longer than usual. Everything took longer when you're carrying what feels like a watermelon strapped to your front. When I finally got there, it was just some discounted items that weren't scanning properly. Nothing major, just needed my authorization. It took about 3 minutes to sort everything out, and then I headed to checkout 8. Before I even got there, I could hear him, the kind of customer that makes retail workers want to find a new career. His voice carried across the front end like a foghorn of entitlement. He was loudly complaining about how long he'd been waiting for help, his voice echoing through the store. I could see him from halfway across the store, standing there with his arms waving in the air like he was directing airplane traffic. He was middle-aged, wearing what looked like an expensive suit that probably cost more than my weekly paycheck. He continued his rant, telling everyone within earshot about how he'd been on his feet all day, and all he wanted was another box of eggs. He kept going on about how incompetent we all were. The poor cashier, one of our newer hires, was just standing there taking it all in. I put on my best customer service smile and approached, asking how I could help him. He spun around, mouth open, clearly ready to continue his tirade. But then something magical happened. His eyes widened as they took in my very pregnant form, and I swear I could actually see him deflate like a balloon. His mouth snapped shut, and his face turned an interesting shade of pink. The cashier, bless her, explained that the customer needed a new box of eggs because his were broken. The customer, now looking anywhere but at me, mumbled that he could go get them himself. The funny thing was, there wasn't even anyone waiting behind him. He could have gotten the eggs at any point instead of standing there making a scene. I told him that it was okay, and reminded him that he'd been on his feet all day, so I'd get the eggs for him. I made sure to waddle away as slowly as possible, taking my sweet time to check each box of eggs thoroughly before bringing one back. The silence at his checkout was deafening when I returned. He couldn't even look me in the eye as he paid and practically ran out of the store. The cashier and I shared a look after he left. She told me it was amazing how quickly things had changed, mentioning that he'd been yelling for about 5 minutes straight before I arrived. I responded by telling her that sometimes the biggest weapon against rudeness is just showing up and letting people realize how ridiculous they're being. I went back to my rounds after that, but I couldn't help smiling every time I passed checkout 8 that evening. There's something satisfying about watching someone's entitled attitude crumble when they realize they've been yelling at a very pregnant woman about eggs. I like to think he learned something that day, or at least felt embarrassed enough to think twice before berating retail workers in the future. My parents owned a laundromat next to a bar, and let me tell you about the time my dad's big mouth got him into some serious trouble. Now, my dad's always been the type who thinks he can do whatever he wants. You know the type. But this time, it really came back to bite him. The issue started with parking spots. Our laundromat had 3 spots right in front of it, but the bar customers would always take them because the bar's entrance was on our side. My parents got permission from the landlord to put up signs saying laundromat parking only, all other vehicles will be ticketed or towed. You'd think that would be enough, right? Nope. People kept parking there anyway, so my parents started calling the authorities to give out tickets. These weren't cheap either, about $50 each. One day while I wasn't there, but I saw it all later on security footage, this guy from the bar came storming up to our door, which was propped open. He demanded to know why he'd gotten a ticket. My mom explained that he had parked in the laundromat parking lot without being a customer. The guy got angry and insisted that we couldn't do this. My brother stepped in and told him that we definitely could since we had the landlord's permission. The guy kicked our door and headed back to his car. My brother, who can be a bit hot-headed himself, grabbed the baseball bat we kept under the counter and stood at the door. The guy came back with his friend but stopped when he saw the bat. He started complaining about how ridiculous this was and how he couldn't afford the ticket. He was about to leave, but my dad, who was fixing machines in the back, just had to come out and make things worse. He started taunting the guy, telling him to go cry to his mom like a crybaby. That did it. The guy came charging back in, throwing everything off my mom's desk. My dad tried to put him in a headlock, but the guy was stronger and threw him into one of the machines. My brother hit the guy with a bat, and he finally left. But my dad wasn't done. No, he had to grab a broom and chase after the guy. Now, picture this. My 55-year-old out-of-shape dad going after a guy in his mid-20s. He managed to hit the guy with the broom, but the guy grabbed it and pulled my dad to the ground. Meanwhile, my brother tried to help, but the guy's friend stopped him. The guy started beating up my dad and dragged him across the parking lot. My mom was on the phone with emergency services the whole time, shouting that she was calling the police. The guy's friend spoke up then, saying they didn't want any trouble with the cops. They took off after that. We later found out they were drug dealers known to the police. My dad was pretty beaten up, but thankfully, nothing was broken, just cuts and scrapes. We gave our statements and the security footage to the police. But 2 weeks later, while my brother was on vacation, my parents got called to the police station to sign some papers. As soon as they got there, they arrested my dad. Turns out, after reviewing the footage, the police decided my dad was actually the aggressor since he'd taunted the guy and then chased him with a weapon, the broom. My dad spent a few hours in a holding cell before being released with a court date. When my brother got back from vacation, he had to do the same thing. I went with my parents to court, but something weird happened. My dad's name wasn't on any of the court lists. We waited for hours watching other cases until finally the judge asked if anyone present wasn't on the list. My dad went up, and the judge looked at his paperwork. He told us to come back after lunch so his assistant could look into it. We came back and waited several more hours. Finally, the judge called out for my dad. Turns out my dad's case had been dropped the day before, but no one had told us. My brother's case got dropped too, but at least they called him before his court date. The funny thing is, this whole mess, the arrest, the court appearance, all of it, could have been avoided if my dad had just kept his mouth shut. But no, he just had to get the last word in. He's a bit more careful now about running his mouth, though I doubt he'll ever fully change. We ended up selling the laundromat a few months later. My dad says it was because it wasn't profitable anymore, but I think he just got tired of dealing with the bar next door. Can't say I blame him, but maybe next time he'll think twice before taunting someone half his age. I've been working as an emergency medical technician for about 5 years now, and let me tell you, it's never boring. I started right after completing my certification at 23, fresh out of a failed attempt at nursing school. Turns out being an EMT was my true calling anyway. The fast-paced environment, the unpredictability, and most importantly, the ability to help people in their most vulnerable moments, it all just clicked. My partner and I were having a hectic day. We'd already responded to 3 cardiac emergencies and a car accident, and now we had an urgent call to pick up a patient from the airport. The flight crew needed us to transport them to the hospital as quickly as possible. These kinds of pickups are always time sensitive. You can't keep a medical flight waiting. We arrived at the airport and parked our ambulance in the emergency vehicle area, right outside the main entrance. After checking in with security and getting all the details sorted out, we started heading back to our vehicle. The patient's plane was due to land in about 15 minutes, so we needed to be ready. As we walked back, our radios were slapping against our cargo pants with each step. Our black boots were reflecting the fluorescent lights overhead, and our municipal emergency medical services uniforms were pristinely tucked in. That's when I heard a man behind us calling out for help. I turned around to see this guy who looked absolutely panicked. He was sweating profusely, and something about him just seemed off. My EMT instincts kicked in immediately. I figured I had about 15 minutes before the plane landed, enough time to at least check his vitals and call for backup if needed. I motioned for him to follow me to the ambulance. Thanks to our prime parking spot, it only took a few steps to reach it. I threw open the side door ready to help. I asked him what was going on, but he just stood there, frozen. When I asked if he needed help getting in, he mumbled that he was looking for gate B11. I let out a small, "Oh." The silence that followed was painfully awkward. I looked at my partner and asked if he knew where gate B11 was. He shook his head and said he had no idea. More uncomfortable silence followed. Finally, I told him that if he didn't need medical assistance, we would have to go, and apologized that we couldn't help her with directions. We got into the ambulance and started driving toward the pickup area. In my rearview mirror, I could see the man walking back into the airport, but something was different about his demeanor. He was moving slowly, almost like he was lost in thought. Later, while waiting for the medical flight to land, my partner and I discussed what had just happened. We've had our share of strange encounters, but this one was different. Usually, when people flag down an ambulance, they're either having a genuine emergency or they're trying to take advantage of emergency services. This guy seemed genuinely distressed at first, but then nothing. About 20 minutes later, after we'd picked up our actual patient and were preparing to leave, we spotted the same man again, this time arguing with an airport security guard. Apparently, he'd been wandering around different terminals, stopping random airport staff and telling them it was an emergency that he find his gate. The security guard was trying to explain that he could simply check the departure boards or ask at any information desk. As we drove past with our patient, we could hear him shouting about how useless everyone was and how he was going to miss his flight. I checked my watch. We'd first encountered him over 30 minutes ago. In that time, he could have walked to every gate in the airport or found multiple information desks. Instead, he'd chosen to create drama and waste everyone's time, including emergency medical services. My partner and I just shook our heads and focused on our actual emergency, getting our patient to the hospital. Some people just don't understand that emergency services are for, well, emergencies, not for airport directions.